when you were building out the new Via Farina in Regency Landing, you built like a dedicated pasta lab. It's a room that has glass walls so guests can see in, but that's like where the pasta is created. Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and my host today, his original plan for life was to be an architect. That thankfully did not come to be. I'm sure he would have been great in that profession, but because he decided to make a career switch, we now have amazing food coming out of not one but two locations of Via Farina. That's right, my guest today is Chef John Ray. John, you've been on the show a couple times, so I got to say welcome back to the Restaurant Hoppen podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
It truly is. I wanted to start today off with a quote that I found from you. And just to kind of describe what Via Farina is in case somebody isn't familiar with it, or even if they are and they want to understand it better. You had a quote that said, "We aren't trying to trick you into thinking you're in Italy. We want to make the best pizza and pasta we can, source the best ingredients we can, make sure our guests are enjoying themselves, and have some fun along the way." How does that sum up the ethos of your restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been, the last 8, almost 9 years of growth is we've gone through ups and downs. We've gone through several patterns, and I think that's where we're at now is we have a lot of fun along the way. We've learned a ton. We've grown a ton, and we have a ton of fun. And I think when we figured out we're not trying to convince people that they're in Italy, I think that opened up a whole new world for us.
And what does that mean exactly? Does that mean just being a little bit more casual, not like...
It is.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, what does that mean to you?
I think part of it, the menu, there's certain dishes that you have to pay homage to tradition. And then there's other times where you just have fun. You just kind of riff on things. You go to the farmer's market, you find something you want to do, and you're not looking for tradition. You're not looking for, something that is traditionally done in Rome or in Tuscany. You're just making a dish that's going to be delicious, and it doesn't need to be coming from anywhere specific. You just want to make a dish that's good.
You don't think they're making pizzas, taco pizzas with refried beans in Tuscany?
Maybe they are. I don't know. I've never been.
That's something that we can explore in the future.
Hey, maybe. We did we might do an Italian beef pizza tonight on the menu.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, we got the beef just came out of the oven last night. We got the giardiniera ready to go. So I think that might be the special. And they're probably not doing that right now.
I would guess not, but maybe Italy's more progressive than we know. I don't know. But that Italian beef sounds incredible. We already have dinner plans. I know I'm already I'm not having FOMO. I'm happy, but
we'll have it all weekend.
Yes. Okay. So Via has 2 locations now. One is near downtown Omaha's Little Italy neighborhood. That's been around since 2016. But you also just opened a second location at the Regency Landing in the fall of 2024. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Seems like it's going super well. There's always a crowd. It always seems like it's always busy there. For you, what has that been like? Because you've been a chef about your entire career now, but it's been one location. What are the opportunities and challenges that having that second location presents?
First of all, I've been blessed with an incredible staff to help me navigate this whole thing. And having 7 years or so at Via Downtown was awesome. Having that time there and having a staff that had been with me for quite a while there has been huge. Being able to navigate the waters of the new restaurant. And then secondly, the second location has been awesome. Since day one, from our management team to, Sadie and the bakery, Ethan that runs our pasta program to, top to bottom, our line cooks, our dish team, our service team, our bar team, everybody top to bottom has been such a huge part of us being able to be successful with this. for me, it's been different than what I expected. Not necessarily better or worse than I expected, but different. I had intended on spending the first few months pretty intensely at Via Regency, and then starting to balance my time out between the two. And since the beginning, it seems like as soon as I get a week where I can start spending a little more time downtown, something happens and I get pulled back out to Regency a little bit. So, downtown I kind of feel like I've kind of had to neglect it a little bit for the last 6 months or so. But every time I get a night where I either get an opportunity to go down there and hang out, or something happens and I'm needed to go down there and hang out for an evening, I love being down there. It's still our baby. It's still home. It's still one of my favorite places to be. Love being on that line. Love being in front of that oven. I always say the Regency has all the new shiny stuff, but downtown has all the character. Downtown is still home.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to ask you about how you've kind of had to readapt yourself, because when you have multiple locations, a lot less of it, in some ways for better, in some ways, like you said, you miss it sometimes for worse, is you're not on the line as much. You're doing a lot more managerial things, a lot more coaching, and you have to develop people because you can't physically be in both locations at once. So you talked about, you've got Ethan and you've got Sadie Paulson, who is one of my favorite bakers in Omaha. She is so incredibly talented. And those people can really help you when you're at one location versus the other. But how hard has that been just mentally for you as a chef, somebody who's used to being in the heart of the kitchen, if not every night, most nights, and now you've had to take a step back and either be at one kitchen and not the other, or kind of be more of that CEO type? What has that been like for you?
It has been it's been a process to learn. The part that makes it a little bit easier is that I know that I have the people in place that can do the job when I'm not there. And then the other part that makes it a little bit easier is that I know that when I'm not there, I'm doing something that I need to be doing. I've never been the type that want to spend all my time with a clipboard or in front of a computer, but literally it was like 3 or 4 days ago, I was sitting there on the computer, and Pat, my chef at Regency, I just looked at him and I said, I feel like I don't even cook anymore. and he said, better you than me. But I still, I kick him out of the kitchen every Friday night, and I take the line Friday nights. Last night I stayed online, every chance I get. If I don't have to be doing something else, I try to stay online at least 2 or 3 nights a week. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Try to go out on the mobile as often as I can when it's needed. Things in motion stay in motion. So I don't ever want to get to the point where I'm not able to cook in my own kitchen. But there are just times where time doesn't allow. I just have too much stuff going on, but it's been a process. I'm still learning it, I think, but I try to split my time accordingly as best I can.
I'm sure on one hand that's nice that you're spending less time on the line, because you probably have a little bit better work-life balance. I know it's easier on the body, but you also, you said that you miss it as well. So I'm sure that you kind of feel that tension, but there has to be, I would imagine, I don't think pride is the right word, but you're not proud of yourself, but you're proud of your other people, that
for sure.
You know that you don't have to be the one manning that pizza oven, and you still feel great about the pizza that's coming and being put in front of a guest. Or this plate of pasta, you might not have plated it and, wiped the plate, made sure it looks great, but you still feel confident saying, I know Ethan absolutely nailed that. I feel comfortable. Even if I'm not seeing any plate that comes out of Via downtown tonight, those guys are going to rock it. What is that feeling like, just knowing that, not that you're not needed, but just like the machine can run itself to some extent?
It's great. It's, whether it's been in the kitchen or just outside of work, mentorship has always been something I've been really passionate about. And so whether it's been guys that I've worked with in the past, take Oscar Hernandez, for example.
Great dude.
That was my
corner
sous chef.
Corner kitchen.
He was my sous chef at M's Pub. And to see him now running Corner Kitchen, and their food is fantastic. And, to see guys like that you've watched their growth pattern and you see them thriving, like that's you enjoy that. That's not even taking pride in what you did. It's just watching their growth is so awesome to watch. And so even right now, I've got a guy, Eddie, that has worked his way completely across the line. We just put him on the oven a few weeks ago. And he's one of the quickest people to ever pick up the oven. And to watch that happen is really cool to see, because the oven is always the place where I always like to watch people kind of build up and then fail a little bit and then build up. It's such an art to me to learn how to work that oven, the various types of wood, and you've got so many things coming in and out of there. It looks simple, but you have so many things going on in your head. And then we've got a handful of guys that run our pasta side too. And I've got this guy, Anthony, over there that is he makes it look effortless most of the time. And all of his pastas are right where they need to be. And then we've got that spaghetti Nero. I don't know if you had that one or not, but every time he hands me one, it's perfect. Absolutely perfect. And anytime I get a chance to expo over on pasta side, I'll tell our staff, like, when you guys are done tonight, order pasta. Like, Anthony's on tonight. Like, if you don't order pasta tonight, you're missing it. Like, he's spot on. I haven't had to correct a single thing that he's done tonight. He's perfect right now.
Oh man.
And these things are fun, and I take zero credit or ego boost or anything to any of the training. It's everything that he's doing to make sure on a night after night after night basis that he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing, and he takes pride in his work, and those things are really, really awesome to watch.
I've not had the spaghetti Nero, but I'm looking at it on the menu right now. Shrimp, garlic, white wine, butter, chili, herbs, lemon.
I mean, when you read off the ingredients, it's like a layup. I mean, you can't miss.
Right. Oh man.
But it's like
one of like 6 pastas on here I'm just dying to try.
But
All
it's
these
like
sound
it's
so
like
good.
it's probably the second best selling pasta since we opened the doors. It's so well balanced, and then like when he nails it, it's the chili, the tarragon, the lemon, the acidity, the butter, everything together, just so harmonious, and he nails every single one.
Can I take a guess at what your best-selling pasta is?
You're gonna nail it right away.
It's egg yolk raviolo.
No,
really?
No.
Okay, what is it?
Rigatoni bolognese.
And you guys do a white bolognese.
Rigatoni bolognese, #1 seller on the entire menu, week after week after week.
That surprises me.
Over the margarita, over everything.
What about that dish do you think really resonates with people?
I think rigatoni is a familiar pasta shape. I think bolognese is a familiar word that bridges tradition with an Americanized palate. I think people like to hear the word meat sauce. People like chicken. I don't know what it is, but both locations, it's a monster seller.
Fair enough. So let's talk a little bit about pasta, because you have so much respect for pasta that when you were building out the new Via Farina in Regency Landing, you built like a dedicated pasta lab. It's a room that has glass walls so guests can see in, but that's like where the pasta is created. What is it about pasta that made you want to pull back the curtain and let people into that and be like, this is what we're doing here. The creation of pasta is so incredible. We don't just want to serve it to you. We want you to see it. What made you want that?
So this is where the fun part of the design comes in, where Ethan Bondelid is the aesthetics guy. Ethan, if you look at his other locations here in town, everything has to be beautiful. Everything has to be a centerpiece. Everything has to be a conversation piece. And whether it's practical or not, it has to be pretty. And I'm on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, where I could care much, much, much less about how pretty it is, as long as it's practical, as long as things are where they're supposed to be, as long as everything just makes sense. I absolutely adore the idea of having the dedicated dough room. He's the one that wanted it front and center with the glass in the dining room. So I got to give a lot of that credit to him. We did some traveling. He had been out to one of Evan Funky's places. Him and I had been to a couple other places where they have some dedicated dough rooms, and it seemed like it was something that was going to start being a little more trendy. Dario has something similar to that over at Avali. It just seemed like something that was going to be a good fit for where we were going. You go to the downtown restaurant, and as soon as you walk in, there's no questioning what the centerpiece is. It's that orange oven straight ahead. So when we went to Regency, we wanted to make sure that you knew that you were still at Via Farina, but we wanted to make some things slightly different. So, when you go in downtown, everything's a lot of 90-degree angles with one centerpiece. And so when we got to Regency, it was a lot of curves. And then you see, you've got your charcuterie island, the dough room, the bar on one side, the orange oven. So your attention's kind of getting drawn multiple different directions. And that dough room has definitely been a hit since getting opened up. So, but I'll give all the credit to him on that being one of the centerpieces for sure.
How fun was being a part, and I don't know how much you were part of it, but being a part of like that team that helped design the new restaurant at Regency.
It was awesome.
Because like when you first came to Via had already been open for, I think, at least a year or two by the time that you came on. So obviously things about the restaurant have changed over years, but the overall bones were pretty well set. With Regency, you just got a ball of clay. And it's like, obviously there are certain aspects like the giant orange oven. There are things that we don't want to change that where if we adjust this too much, we're getting away from Via's DNA. But at the same time, we can play around a little bit, and we can put in a charcuterie island if we want to. We can move around where the bar is if we want to. What was that experience like for you as a chef to be a part of that team and have some input on the design of things?
It was awesome. It was such a cool learning experience. Like I said, to work with somebody like Ethan, he just has such an eye for detail. For anybody who's into that stuff, even if you don't buy anything, just go around to the bars that Ethan has, Wicked Rabbit, Alice, La Colonna, Berry and Rye, Barnado, and just look at them. Like they're all so wildly different. You'd never know that the same person had to do with all of them. And so to be in a room with him, his creative palette, with the architects, with the design guys, with, the contractors, and to watch everything come together. And I got to Via Downtown about 15 months after opening.
There we go.
And so to be able to have a very firm list of things that are on my, quote unquote, like demand list. And that demand list was certain things that we absolutely have to have and certain things that we absolutely cannot do the same as we did at the one downtown. And some of those were like, we can't put drains underneath the oven that doesn't move. Things like that there were certain things with the downtown design that made some things incredibly, incredibly difficult. So a lot of it was just, going into a meeting and just being like, no, that drain can't be there. That drain has to be somewhere else. It can't be under an oven that doesn't move. That sink can't go there. That sink has to slide over 3 foot for this exact reason. But we would have never known that without the experience. So to be a part of that was great. To know that we spend way more time and we need way more product in dry storage than any amount of time we'll ever spend in an office. So I'll give up space in the office for dry storage all the time. So our office is the size of a closet, but nobody spends time in there. So who cares?
Yeah. Why waste space on it?
Bingo.
Okay. Let's talk about pizza. You have described your pizza as non-traditional or Neo-Neapolitan style. What makes you say that?
I still don't. I feel like for the first so many years, and I feel like I've said this a million times, we kind of had to describe our pizza by what our pizza wasn't. And, Nick out at Dante, being the only certified Neapolitan in town, we had this, people would ask, like, what style of pizza are you? And at this point, there was still very, like, you were either one type of pizza or another. And so we'd say we're Neapolitan style. And as soon as you throw that word style behind it, you're immediately kind of downgrading what you're doing a little bit. You know, it's kind of like buying a Parmesan style cheese.
Feels like a knockoff.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, say we're not Veracera, we're not this, we don't do this, we don't do this. And pretty soon you're trying to describe your pizza by what you don't do. So we finally, you know, I think it was kind of like getting into, you know, Pizza Expo when we really kind of started getting our footing, building up our confidence a little bit more, and found the pizza world really that we finally kind of just started calling it what it is. It's wood-fired sourdough pizza. Some people were calling that style, or basically any style similar, kind of a Neo-Neapolitan, which also kind of took on this like whole other, it became such a huge, wide range of what that could be as well. Basically, like, if on the surface it looked Neapolitan, then it fell into a Neo-Neapolitan range. So, I don't know. I kind of like to just call it wood-fired sourdough at this point. But
You can just call it delicious.
yeah,
Just leave it at
I'm
that.
good with that.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
I love that you brought up the Pizza Expo because I was going to ask about this later, but you brought it up, so we're going to go there right now. I found an article where you were talking about the Pizza Expo in Las Vegas, which is just this giant. I mean, it's like the who's who of pizza. If you love pizza in America, or you make pizza in America, or if you're interested in pizza in America, if you make pizza products, you go to this thing in
Not
Vegas.
just in America.
This is the world. This
is everybody.
Okay, this is the
the
world.
biggest pizza expo in the world.
Fair enough. So you went to the one in 2022, and I know that you've gone to several since then. But you've said that one was a game changer for you. What was it about that conference that invigorated your passion for pizza?
So I think what the Pizza Expo did for me was showed us that the pizza world runs parallel with the restaurant world, but is separated slightly. And what I mean by that is there's certain aspects of the restaurant world that you kind of get to leave behind a little bit. The insane amount of stress, the cutthroat competitiveness. I don't know. There was always this kind of weird negativity that always kind of seemed to be lurking a little bit. And you get into pizza, and all of a sudden it's this overwhelming positivity of people that are constantly trying to raise one another up, trying to share information. The pizza world lives in a world of, why would I want you to go through the same battles that I went through to get to where I'm at now? Why wouldn't I just share where I'm at now so you can start there and we can all get better together and we can all just expedite this process together? You know, you travel and people invite you into their kitchens, invite you back to their ovens. You know, I've been out to, you know, just in one trip to New York, you know, we went to 3 of the top 10 places in the country, and Dan Richer was at Razza, and he took me back to his kitchen and took me into his dough room, and I'd never met the guy. I just went to his restaurant. Best pizza I've ever had in my life. You know, we went over to Keste, and Chef Roberto over there, you know, number 10 place in the country, gave me and our family a full tour of his whole place, his whole operation, upstairs, downstairs, just because we're pizza people. Like, that's it. Like, it's hard to explain without getting yourself into it, but it's different. It's different, and I'm 100% in love with it.
That was something that struck me, and I don't know, I think it's kind of died down a little bit, but last year, David Lasoli over at Virtuoso Pizzeria was very passionate about the Omaha Pizza Alliance, and it was bringing together however many pizza restaurant owners, just people who are interested in pizza, want to gather at his restaurant. You could come and you would all talk about pizza, and I was like, we're not seeing this with pasta restaurants. We're not seeing this with new American restaurants. We're not seeing this with French restaurants. Like, what? It was really cool to see, but part of me was just like, I wonder what the driving force behind this is. Can you put your finger on that? Why is there just a different feeling around pizza where so much of the food world is so competitive? And it's, if you're going to get back in somebody else's kitchen. You got to be doing a stage, or you got to know somebody who knows somebody, or you got to be a friend. And with pizza, it's just like you can eat at somebody's restaurant and be like, yeah, come back. I'll show you my recipe. What is that?
I don't know exactly what it is, but I think there's an element of relaxed and fun when you get to take your childhood favorite food.
Yeah.
And that's how I literally and figuratively feed my family now. I make pizza. I get to have a passion for pizza for the rest of my life. That's how I'm going to make a living, and I'm psyched about it. Like, what is there to be upset about? And then right now in Omaha, I think it's easy to see that we're having our moment. I think this has been going on other places for quite a while, and I think we're just now having our moment. And I think part of that is, La Soleil's been going to Pizza Expo for years, well before I ever went there. In fact, I didn't even know Pizza Expo was a thing until Peter, that used to work with us, and you've met Peter. He came from Cart Driver in Denver, and they were familiar with the Pizza Expo circuit. He's the one that kind of turned us on to it. Without that, I don't even know if I know about Pizza Expo, to be honest with you. And so that was huge for us. Dante was Independent Pizzeria of the Year a handful of years ago. So they were familiar with it, but when they were doing it, nobody else was on that level. It's like trying to be a hockey fan in Omaha. Like, it's great to love hockey, but if you don't have anybody else to watch it with, it's really hard for it to kind of blow up. So now you finally have an opportunity where Dante is still doing things at a very, very high level. And we've picked up on the Expo thing, and David, of course, does an incredible job over there. And now you got Izzy's that pops up in town, and now all of a sudden you've got all these people in town where the pizza game is really started to elevate. And now I think that's why you're seeing that really positive camaraderie in the pizza game in Omaha specifically, is like we're finally just having our moment. We're finally having people that are having fun, building that camaraderie and taking it serious all at the same time. There's a bunch of us that meet up out there in Vegas. We run into each other at the expo. We might go out and grab a slice together afterwards and have a blast.
Mm-hmm. So 2 comments based off that, what you had to say, because there was so much wisdom in that answer. I absolutely loved it. I absolutely love Dante's Pizza, and I know how much science and love. They're VPN certified. The background on my phone is a Dante Margarita pizza. Fantastic.
For sure.
I can also slam a Little Caesars. They used to be $5. I don't know how much it costs anymore, but a hot and ready. And they're 2 wildly different things, but you can love them both.
Yes,
and
you don't have to pick.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like, it feels weird to be pretentious about pizza, because pizza is just like, it's that universal thing. Like, everybody loves pizza.
Of course.
So I think that that was really interesting what you said there. And then I love how you kind of pointed out how much Omaha's pizza scene is growing. And like, just looking at my list of favorite pizzerias, I mean, like Via Farina, Dante, Virtuoso, those guys have been around for a long time. But I'm looking at the rest of this list, and it's places that have opened, at least in Omaha, in the last 3 to 4 years. Dolomiti, Izzy's, Terrible Gerald's, Moots, Lyle's, Tiny's Pizza Joint. Like, it's places that are really, just more and more places are popping up and starting to take the craft seriously. And I think that's exciting to see that, kind of like you said, it's not just, being a hockey fan in the middle of America, sure, where it's kind of like, yes, I'm so passionate about pizza, and no one else is really here. But now you've got these other players coming into the game who are like, yeah, I'll talk about hockey with you. Let's do this and get into it.
Exactly. It's the list right now is stronger and longer than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. I think one of the places, I'm not here to talk negatively about anybody at all, but one of the places that I don't think gets near enough love is Brick Oven Pizzeria over on 72nd.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Nebraska French Mart.
Oh my gosh. They do an incredible job.
They do some very good stuff, for sure. So, okay, so you go to Pizza Expo in 2022. You get really excited. What changes did you implement when you returned? Like, how were you and Via Farina different after that experience?
So as soon as we got back that year, at that point, Paul Kulik and Ethan Bondelid were the two co-owners at that point, and I did a lot of homework at that point, and I was looking at our menu, and I thought if we were going to make our move, now was going to be the time. We're coming out of COVID at this point, and I wanted to increase the amount of pizzas significantly on our menu, and I wanted to decrease the amount of pastas on our menu, at least for the time being, because we had some momentum going on the pizza side at this point. And so I knew I had to kind of pick one of them. If I picked a meeting with both of them at the same time, it wasn't going to go my way. So I had to kind of be strategic with it. So I picked Ethan because I thought it would be an easier conversation to go my way. Not only did I pick incorrectly, but Paul showed up at the coffee shop during our meeting. But we ended up all talking and all agreeing to make this move. So we ended up settling on increasing the pizza menu, which in turn allowed us to get a little bit more outside of our comfort zone pizza-wise and start having a little bit more fun. Items like the patata pizza, with the truffle potato chips on top and things like that. Once we did that, that's when we really hit our stride with the pizzas. And it's kind of been all uphill since then with the pizza side of it. That's when we really started getting to try more things, understanding our pizza dough more, taking classes, understanding as much as, a cook that doesn't come from a dough background or a science background or a baking background can understand about a pizza dough and the temperature of the oven and the type of heat source that we're using. And there's all these things. As soon as you learn one thing, then you got to go 10 steps back and start going forward again. And then you change something, then you go all the way back and you start moving forward again. And so it was like we almost became like manic about it, where it was podcast and classes constantly, to the point that I was like, I mean, having to like stop myself from doing it because it was consuming like every waking moment for a while. But it was so much fun. We were having so much fun with it, and we were seeing the results. We were seeing sales go up. We were seeing the quality of our pizza go up. We were seeing the popularity of our pizza. Whether it was a write-up in Pizza Today, whether it was a spot on your podcast, whether it was, an SBH write-up, whatever it was, we were seeing the short-term results of what we were doing, and in the building with the talks we were having, we thought we would also see the long-term results of what we were doing. So we didn't feel like there was any wasted movement in what we were doing. So we felt as though it was worth it.
Why sourdough pizza?
Sourdough is what we had when I came on. Paul came from a sourdough background, so that's where it was. And if it's not broke, don't fix it.
What are the benefits of sourdough?
Benefits of sourdough. First of all, it's far more digestible. So on the health side of it, there's that. The flavor is incredible if you know how to harness it. And I think that's a really important thing. I've had other sourdough products, whether it be bread or pizza, and you got to know how to use it properly, depending on what product you're having. I've had some sourdough pizzas, whether they be overproofed or just too much sourdough, and the dough itself tastes more like an English muffin, and I think that's just too much. Certain toppings just don't work with that much of a sour note, so I'm not a fan of those. But when you dial in the percentages, when you dial in the fermentation time, everything's proofed properly. And again, this is like the 10 steps back, and then you start working forward again. When you get the proper amount of sourdough with the proper amount of salt, the proper fermentation, the right tomato for your crust. That's another thing, the sweetness and the acidity, All these things have to align properly, and then you find the right cheese for your product, and on and on and on. And once all these things line up, then that's when you've got your product.
So we're talking about this period, and I'm sure it wasn't just 2022, but it kind of started in 2022.
Oh, and it's still going.
It's still going. Where you're unbuilding and then rebuilding and then unbuilding and then rebuilding, unbuilding, rebuilding. Like you said, it's not finished. But at what point did you feel like you got pretty locked in, where you're still tweaking, but it's like this is the core of a Via Farina pizza? How long do you think that was?
So I feel like we still occasionally have these like moments that are like pivotal moments where things change. So we were using Caputo Blue, like the most common pizza flour in the world. And Cisco was short on it at one point. And we kept trying to take the hydration level up. And the reason for that is multi-angle. If you can take your hydration level up, first of all, you can make more dough and it costs less. You take your hydration up, you're going to have a more tender pizza dough. You take your hydration level up, you're using a high heat source, like our oven that we're running at 750, 800 degrees. You get that nice, big, puffy crust on there that's super airy. It's just exactly what you want. But we could only take that Caputo Blue to like the low 70s. And if we try to go much higher than that, it'd be too loose to really work with. And so Cisco's out of Caputo Blue one time, and they give us this domestic product called Graincraft. And Cisco says, we don't want it back. We know you don't want it. Give it away. Use it for something. Throw it in the dumpster. Whatever you want to do with it. So we're like, well, we're not going to just throw it away. Let's try to make a batch of pizza dough with it and see what happens. So we make it, and it's so tight. Like we can't even stretch it. Aha. Let's take the hydration up. So we take the hydration to like 75. Now we can use it. Now we go to like 77. And we can still use it. And we're like, okay, here goes our hydration. Guess what? Caputo Blue's gone. This is our new flour now. So now we use that flour for like 2 or 3 years. Well, now Graincraft gets to a point where the flour's working tremendously for us, but their customer service is non-existent, and they end up being short like 2 to 3 times a year, and it's during the busiest times of the year. It's like Maha's coming up, and we've got all these other things going on, and we're short on flour for 10 days. And we don't have another flour to pivot to. And we try to get a hold of the company. We get a hold of them out at Pizza Expo, and they don't want to work with us. Same time, Orlando Foods, that represents Caputo, comes back into town, and they say, let's work together. What do we want to do? So we start working with them. So we start, doing some trials with all their flours. Then comes in Nuvolo Super from Caputo. Boom, there's our next moment. So now we change everything again. We get back to the basics, and we start building. And so now we feel like when we went from Caputo Blue to Graincraft, our pizza became better than it had ever been. Then we go to Nuvolo Super. Now we feel like our pizza is even better than it's ever been. We switch a cheese, better than it's ever been. So every time we make one of these different changes, we don't make these changes just because something got cheaper, something got easier to come by. It's like we need to check several boxes. And if we check all those boxes and we're able to make that change, then it's something we're talking about in the building. It's something that, the regulars are going to notice. We're doing it for a reason, for sure.
The amount of science that goes into making pizza and pasta,
it's
honestly,
crazy.
Is ridiculous. I mean, I think, that's kind of the thing. Like, pizza is such an accessible thing, and you can pop a Totino's pizza in the oven and have it ready in 10 minutes. That people just don't understand, like how.
But they've probably got a whole room of scientists
for
that
sure
are figuring out
without
exactly
a doubt
how to make that happen.
Yes. And it doesn't always happen well, but,
yeah.
To each their own. I want to get back to the idea of having fun with pizza, because I made the mention of the refried beans pizza. That is a special that you run. And most of your pizzas on your standard menu are pretty classic. You got the margarita, you got the pepperoni, the sausage. You do have the potato pizza, which I think potatoes on pizza is becoming more and more popular because it's delicious.
I think we started that back in like 2018, maybe 2019. Like it was one of the very first pizzas I ever put on the menu at Via, and it's now probably on its like 4th or 5th iteration, but every time I quit it, I end up putting it back on because I absolutely adore it.
Carbs on carbs. There's nothing wrong with that.
And then throw some stinky cheese on it or something, and I'm good to go.
For sure. You've also had previous specials that you've had. You've had pizzas with roasted beets. You mentioned you might bring back the giardiniera with the Italian beef pizza. You put figs. And the most controversial ingredient of them all, pineapple.
Pineapple.
The forbidden fruit. That's been on both specials and your regular menu. Most pizzerias, I think this is changing a little bit, but even 10, 15 years ago, most pizzerias would not dream of putting these ingredients on top of a pizza. What do you think has changed, and what gives you the confidence to just treat pizza like a blank canvas and say, you know what, you've never had pizza like this before, but if you have this, you're going to love it?
I think part of it's our style of pizza. I think it's two different things. One, our style of pizza is light and it's delicate, and you don't want to overload with toppings. So I think if you were to go to like a big box pizza place, these toppings don't work because you need so much to hold up to that much dough. Or if I was going to do like, the Roman style that we've been experimenting with, like a lot of these toppings wouldn't hold up. But because it's so thin and light and airy, things like figs and fruits and things like this, they do hold up on this pizza. And then you add that note of the sourdough on there. And then we have all these wonderful cheeses and different things that we're able to complement all these ingredients with. And then we also have a lot of us that are just coming from a chef's background that we know what else to put with it to make it all make sense. The other thing is, I've always been like, I like ketchup on my hot dogs. And I'm tired. By the time I was like 15, I was tired of people telling me to not put ketchup on my hot dogs. Like, oh, you're the worst ever. It's mustard only. Like, I'm not here to tell you what to put on your pizza or your hot dog or anything else. Like, if you want pineapple on your pizza, eat it. I don't like it. I'll put it on the menu for you. But I think pineapple on pizza is gross. I think it tastes like you're eating ketchup on pizza. And I love ketchup. I don't want it on my pizza.
I think I haven't secured this yet, but I think I'm going to have a pizza from Izzy's tonight that has pickles and ranch and bacon on it, which sounds totally wild. Most people probably would never even think to create that, but he swears by it. Brett swears by it, and I'm like, try everything once.
I want that pickle pizza so bad. We're actually in a weight loss competition right now. The final weigh-in is this Sunday. And after it, I'm going to get the pickle pizza.
Okay, I was going to say, maybe don't go to Izzy's if you're in a weight loss competition, but to celebrate afterwards.
Yes.
Okay.
Next weekend.
Well, now you have just locked in my order for tonight, and I will follow up with you and let you know.
Perfect.
Whet your appetite. Maybe I'll wait until the competition's over, so I'm not like torturing you, but I'll let you know how good it is. I mentioned this off the bat, but I want to get into it a little bit more. Your goal was not always to be a chef. You had some interest in architecture, but you had a guidance counselor, Tom Barber, who was the one who mentioned culinary school to you.
So the architecture thing was more of it sounded fun when I was like early in high school. But I think before that ever really like had any legs, I realized that I had zero artistic ability. Like none. Like if it's not on a plate.
It's going to make architecture difficult.
If it's not on a plate, I got nothing for you. So well before it was even time to like pick a college or anything, like architecture was out the window.
Okay.
I think I only even made it out of art class probably because like my best friend's mom was our art teacher. So I had kind of got to a point where I just was kind of like, I'm probably not going to go to college. I don't know. Like, I wasn't going to be a person that was going to go to college just to go to college. If I landed on something that I wanted to do, I would go. Otherwise, jump into the workforce and just kind of see where life takes me. And then, I had a counselor that, I had been working at the local restaurant there in town. We did Tex-Mex, pizza, burgers, that kind of stuff. In fact, there's the last location of it still in Fremont, called Santa Ana's. The menu's so weirdly similar to the menu I cooked when I was 16. But I had a handful of people that would specifically come on nights when I worked, and when you're in a town of 1,200 people, it's kind of cool. Like, some of the teachers and cops and firemen and stuff like that will come and specifically come on the nights when you're working, and that's kind of cool. And so, yeah, he sent for a package on Le Cordon Bleu for me, and he said, have you thought about culinary school? And I had never even heard of culinary school. I didn't know that going to school to be a chef was a thing, and so I applied to one school, no backup plan, and they accepted me, and that was it. I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it.
After culinary school, what brought you back to Omaha?
I went broke. I went. I had to do an internship that was really aggressive. School itself was really aggressive, very, very demanding time-wise. You don't get a whole lot of opportunity to work through it. Schedule is pretty intense. Homework's pretty intense. It's a 3-year Paris program that they cram into 1 year in the U.S. for some reason. I wish I would have done a little more homework on different schools, and I probably would have chosen a different school. But at the time, it sounded awesome. So it's a really intense program, and then at the end of it, you finish it with like a 2-month internship, which is unpaid. And I had a chef that just simply would not give me a static schedule. He wanted me there and available for all day parts, and so I might 1 week work in 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. shifts and 10 a.m. to closes, and I was all over the place. So I basically had to work 2 months with no income, and that was it. So at the end of that, I had to move back home and worked out in Columbus for about a year, maybe closer to a year and a half, and then after that came to Omaha and worked at V Mertz, and kind of been building since then.
Yeah, I know that you've worked at a couple different restaurants around Omaha, but at least from an article that I found, one of the people who really helped your career was a man named Jay Bach.
Oh, man.
Who was the general manager at M's Pub, and he challenged you to think about your career in new ways. And he went to the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in 2010, and unfortunately, on the way back, he passed away.
I was just telling this story 2 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, retell it now. Go ahead. You can tell it far better than I can.
Yeah, I started at M's Pub, would have been spring 2010. And for anybody who knows J Bach was a larger-than-life individual, both literally and figuratively. He's one of the true general managers I've ever had the pleasure to work with. An incredible, incredible person. To this day, I've never been at a funeral as big as that was. And so I started, and we had a conversation about what my goals and aspirations were going to be, and I told him, pretty quickly that I wanted to take over M's Pub as the chef, and he said, let's start getting things in line and figure out what we need to do. And so he said, I'm not worried about the cooking side. Let's start working on the admin side of things. And so it was, we're going to work on scheduling and ordering and this was my second sous chef spot behind the Field Club. And the Field Club was more cooking, not a whole lot of admin stuff. The chef took care of most of that stuff. So, and ordering at M's Pub was intense. That place is a machine, insane amount of business. For a 100-seat restaurant, you're doing produce orders 5 days a week. You're ordering big houses 4 times a week. You're, sometimes on Sunday going into Monday, you're ordering from 14 different vendors because
Holy cow.
You might have 4 different places you're ordering seafood from, a specialty vendor for rice, a specialty vendor for nuts. It was wild. And so he said he had, I think it was sometime in May or June, he had a few days he was going to be going out of town for a motorcycle thing. And so he said, I'm going to have you do orders and we'll see how it goes. And so he came back and nothing had been catastrophically messed up. So he said, I'll have you keep kind of dabbling in them. And then the next real test will be when I go for 10 days or whatever to Sturgis. And so I can remember, it was like the last couple days that that J-Bach was going to be gone, and I was in the basement wrapping up orders on a Sunday night, and Smitty, the bartender, had come down and asked how I was holding up, and I said, I'm good, but I'm tired, and I'm ready for J-Bach to get back. I'm wiped out. This is a lot to take on. I'm glad that I've got him. And I think it was like 20 minutes later, the cops came in looking for next of kin to J-Bach, and that's when we found out that he had been, he perished in a motorcycle accident. And then that was when M's Pub changed for everybody. That was, it was like, the job that I thought I was taking on temporarily just became mine permanently. And was from then until the fire, 6 years later.
Until 2016, yeah.
And there was he did so much there. I don't throw around the term general manager very lightly because he's the true general manager that I worked with. If there was an issue behind the bar, he was there before we ever called anybody. If there was an issue with the grill, he was back there trying to fix it before we called anybody. If somebody sitting at the bar needed a recipe, that's why I've always been an open book with recipes. It was one of my first handful of days there, and we sat down to have a drink after a lunch shift, and he was drinking his ouzo like he always did, and there was an older couple sitting next to us, and she was just raving to her husband about how much she loved the Greek sandwich down at M's Pub, which is the most bizarre sandwich ever. Are you familiar with the Greek sandwich? Mm-mm. It's the most bizarre sandwich ever.
Well, now I'm looking it up.
You got to look it up, and then I'll tell you when we get off the mics about it. But she was just raving about it, and he grabbed a piece of paper, and he wrote down the recipe, and he slid it over to her, and she went, "Oh, my gosh, how did you know the recipe?" And he said, "My name is J-Bach. I've been the general manager for 26 years, and here's my card. If you ever need any more recipes, you just let me know." And she said, "Why on earth would you give me the recipe?" And he said, "You're not coming here for the recipe. You're coming here for the ambiance. You're coming here for the service. You can go home and make this recipe. You're still going to come back. I'm not worried about losing business." And I thought that was incredible. That was really impressive, and it made sense. And since then, I've never once held a recipe back. If you come into the restaurant and ask for a recipe, we'll send our recipe book out to you, and you can take whatever pictures you want. If we're not too busy, we'll even scale it for you. But it was, for the limited amount of time I got to work with him, he was really, really, really influential. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody say a bad word about him. And for somebody to work in a busy restaurant like that for that long, and I think everybody else in that building, I've heard somebody say something negative about at some point, regardless of how long you worked there. And for, people had this visual. The guy was just a mountain of an individual. He was huge. And people had this visual of him getting on his motorcycle and heading to the golf course with his bag on his back. And he was just such a special person. And anybody who had a chance to work with him, I think, would say the same thing.
Oh, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. The M's Greek sandwich, I have it up now. I have to share it. It's ground turkey, walnuts, mayo, and lemon on crustless whole wheat bread.
Absolutely nothing Greek about it.
Nope.
It's cut into triangles. Some people dip it in poppy seed dressing. I don't get anything about it. It's extremely popular. People order a bunch of them to take home for parties and stuff. It's bizarre.
It just has a cult following at this point, I guess. So I want to talk about what that time was like for you, because like you mentioned, you were kind of dipping your toe into those waters of more the admin side and the ordering and, thinking about things beyond just cooking. And you got a little experience doing that. And then all of a sudden, bam, that's your job now. You went from, I'm a rookie, I've spent, 3 games in the big leagues, and now I'm the starting first baseman for the New York Yankees. It's sink or swim, kid. What was that time like for you?
I think once we got over the shock factor of Jay not being there, I think I settled in pretty comfortably. I still had Bobby McKinney with me. He was technically still the head over M's and Vivace at the time. But otherwise, I wasn't married yet. I didn't have a kid. And so, when you were the chef at M's, you just kind of knew that the hours were going to be long. I think it was, typically, anywhere from, 50 to 65 hours a week typically. And that didn't include a lot of your at-home hours. We did a new special menu every 2 weeks, so every week you were either writing a new menu or executing a new menu. But it never felt odd. I mean, it was just the way it was. It was, but you didn't feel like you were letting anybody down either, because you didn't have anybody at home upset that you weren't at home, so it was just, if you weren't there, you were going to end up being at the bar or something, so you may as well just keep grinding. So I don't know. I mean, I look back at those days of being pretty fond. I don't ever look back and think that it was, a crazy amount of hours or crazy stress or anything like that. Like, it was hard, but I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, it was one of the best jobs I ever had, for sure.
I'm not trying to fast forward too fast through your career, but I want to bring us back to Via Farina. So big fire happens at M's Pub in 2016. It closed down. It's reopened since, but that kind of put that job out of sight at that point. You cooked at a couple other restaurants, Paragon, then Moolah for a bit. Not saying anything bad about those places, but those weren't really your passions. When did Via Farina come on your radar, and what was it about that job that stuck?
So I was at Moolah, and I was kind of considering just like a career change altogether. I mean,
really?
Yeah. The fire at M's, the way Paragon ended, because Paragon was a passion project. Paragon was, God, without diving too far in on that one, because that one could take all day. Paragon wiped me out. Paragon was several months of an insane amount of hours, an insane amount of work, lots and lots of stress, and working towards something, and to find out that we're hitting all these goals, and then basically for it all to just come to like a screeching halt, was pretty devastating. And so I don't think Moolah really had anything to do with it. I think I was still just like reeling from all the devastation from Paragon, really. And so when we got into that, summer 2017, I was really just kind of like, do I even want to keep doing this? Is there something else that I should be doing where I can just make as much money, beat myself up less, work less hours, and maybe just kind of direct my passion for something at home? Or, I don't know what it was. It was just, just a lot of, thinking like, is there something else I should be doing? And Jeremy Hunter was the GM at Via at the time, and I had worked with him for years at M's, and I had known him even before that. And he called me, and actually I had an interview elsewhere from somebody who had called, and it wasn't a job that I was super interested in, but it was very attractive money and benefits. And so I was supposed to go take a stage with them, and I wasn't thrilled, but I was also in a position where I had to look out for my family. It was no longer about just what I wanted, and they had called and said, hey, we're going to have to punt this stage 1 week down the road. We got some things come up. I said, okay, that's fine. Let's hold off for another week. And within that week, Jeremy called me, and he said, hey, do you want to take over the kitchen at Via? And so let's sit down and have a talk. So I went to meet Paul and Ethan, and that was when I had this, like, you know what? I've never worked a full pasta station. Never worked with sourdough. Never worked a wood-fired oven. Never worked this. Never worked that. You know what? To hell with it. Let's do it. Let's start over. Let's start from scratch. Let's take a whole new approach. Let's go from this world to this world. Let's hit the reset button. And the best decision I've made in the kitchen, for sure.
What was it about that reignited the passion in you?
You know what? I don't know. I think it was
Was it just that it was so new? Because we've talked about how intricate pizza and pasta are and how they are crafts unto themselves. And you'd worked with both of those products to some extent in your career, but now that was like front and center. Was having something that new maybe what brought it out in you
I think
again?
it was. I think a lot of it was how much everything was new. I mean, every part of that kitchen was so new. I mean, to cook anything in that oven without ever having cooked in a wood oven before, to not know how to regulate the temp, to not know which woods burn higher or lower or longer or slower, like to be clueless on that is incredible. And then to learn that as you go, or to go over to the pasta side and learn how to appreciate the starch in the pasta water, to know how to time a pasta when it goes from fresh and you're only cooking a pasta for maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes in water before it goes into your pan for the pickup and should be consumed within, 4 minutes. Like, you're learning so much so fast. But meanwhile, like, we flipped the whole kitchen at that time. So like we had a whole brand new staff. So it wasn't just me learning, it was all of us learning. We're baking bread in Dutch ovens. So it was new, but then there was also, I think there was an element of everything else that I had done previously, not having to worry about all these other components, whether it was working on these finesse dishes for a wine dinner or not worrying about what I was going to do for a full setup on this entree set. What are my starches and veggies and sauces and all these other components going to be? It was just like, what are we putting on this pizza? What is this pasta? And being able to go home and dive into a book or a website or a video and just start learning about dishes of Rome or ingredients from this region or just starting fresh, I think.
This is one of those times where I absolutely hate the clock because I need to respect your time. I need to respect the studio's time, and we've been going for a little over an hour now, and I feel like I'm disrespecting your background and Italian cooking and Via Farina and everything by cutting it off now because, we could go for hours right now, John, and you're just such a fun person to talk to.
Appreciate it.
I got to ask this one question, though, especially kind of briefly running through your career. Knowing what you know now, learning what you've learned, if you could go back and talk to that high schooler who didn't know what he wanted to do and ultimately got talked into culinary school, what would you tell him now?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm going to stretch your brain a little bit.
I think I would have said from day one, don't hesitate, don't be scared, don't be nervous. Dive into absolutely every situation, every opportunity, and even if it doesn't go how you want, learn from everything. I think a lot of opportunities get missed because people are afraid of failing. I think people get into new situations and shy away from things because they're nervous of what the outcome might be if they raise their hand to ask a question. And I know at the beginning of culinary school for sure, I was one of a couple kids that was right out of high school. There's a lot of adults in culinary school actually. And I sat there quietly at the beginning for quite a while until I kind of made a firm decision to just be like, what, to hell with it. I'm just going to ask questions when I got questions. I'm going to dive in a little bit. But I think that would have been it. I think all the way through high school, into college, into the workforce, I think just being more assertive, asking more questions, diving in a little bit more would be helpful, not just for me, but for everybody, I think.
The greatest piece of advice that someone has ever given me is never say no.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's nuance to that. There are times where you physically can't do something or you just know, hey, I'm not supposed to do this. But if you're on the fence or you feel something in your brain tugging and saying, I'm uncomfortable doing this. This is new to me, but I should do it, then say yes. Because you never know. Even, like you said, even if it doesn't work out, that experience is going to teach you something. It's going to give you a skill that you can use in some other part of your life. And I think that that's kind of what happened when you started at Via Farina, is I think a lot of people, especially after, maybe we can have another episode where we talk more about Paragon, but after the pain of that not coming through, to go back to step one and say, I got to learn pizza and pasta now and operate an Italian restaurant, that's too much. I can't do that again. I can't start from ground zero again. But you did. You said yes. You did it. You've developed a deep love for this food now.
I'm so glad I did it.
And you've created restaurants, plural now, that people absolutely love.
I appreciate that.
And like this is normally the part of the podcast where I'm like, people go check out this restaurant. If you're listening to this, you've probably been to Via Farina, probably many times. You're probably a fan already. It doesn't matter. Go back. Go to the downtown location. Go to the new Regency location if you haven't been out there. It's still Via Farina, but it's a different vibe. There are different dishes 100%. On the menu. It's worth checking out without a doubt. And we didn't get a chance to talk much about her, but the bread program, what that Sadie has going, is fantastic. So even if all you do when you go to Via Farina is buy a loaf of bread, go to Via Farina for that reason. John, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again today. This was awesome.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you.
Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.